The new Warzone is here, and the patch notes that were released by Raven Software were a deeply comprehensive and impressive understanding of all of the shortfalls of Warzone and all of the things that make Warzone very good. After getting hands-on with about a day and a half now of gameplay, I've been incredibly impressed with just how good this version of Warzone feels. This feels like an iterational improvement of Modern Warfare 2019. It feels like we've gone back to the quality and fluidity of gameplay that we had in the Verdansk era of Warzone, but whilst doing all of that, we've been given this huge quality of life pass that has greatly improved many frustrations that I have with Warzone generally. But not everything is perfect, and today I wanted to talk about some of the key flaws that are undermining the new version of Warzone. Now, I should state, overall, I've had a fantastic time, and I would rate this Warzone somewhere around an 8 to an 8.5 out of 10. But with a few more minor tweaks, some of which I'm sure will occur in upcoming updates, we could genuinely be looking at a version of Warzone which is in the best shape it's ever been in terms of quality of life, in terms of frustration, in terms of just how the game works and flows. We're very close to something special. I'm really curious to see you guys' thoughts and feelings in the comment section below, so let me know your initial thoughts on what you've played in Warzone so far. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe as well, as we're on the road to 200k. The first thing that struck me about this new version of Warzone was the pacing of the game, and I think it kind of underlies every complaint I have about this current iteration. It's nearly perfect, but it's not quite perfect. You can forget all of the complaints people had about 100 players because this version of Warzone is intense from the second you land in to the second you finish, and I have only had a handful of games where there's been any kind of notable downtime or situations where I've had to actively go out and look for squads. But the unfortunate problem for me with this version of Warzone is that 20 minutes, much like Raven Software alluded to, is in fact too short. They said that they felt the current time of the Warzone game was a little bit too short, and I entirely agree. 20 minutes is just too fast. I think they need to increase this into a more 22 to 24 minute region, and the reason for that is quite simple. The current version of this plays more like Resurgence and less like a traditional battle royale. In a battle royale, there are meant to be natural instances of downtime because you need moments to adjust your loot, you need moments to think about your strategy, moments to think about where you're going to be rotating to. But in this version of Warzone, you are being third-partied pretty much from the start of the game to the end of the game. The current method they have brings about probably the best mid-game of any Warzone I've ever seen in terms of the number of fights you have and the general engagement, but the problem with that is that you just don't get a moment to breathe. And whilst that can be appreciated by some groups of players, especially those of you who enjoy Resurgence, for a big map battle royale, I just don't think it fits very well. I would like to see the overall game time finish around 22 to 24 minutes, which will increase the overall length, but it won't naturally mess with the pacing too much. And they may want to consider upping the player count to about 120 players, to offset that extended timer to maintain some mid-game intensity. The next thing that I feel needs adjusting is the gas mask system. Now, in the patch notes, when they said that the first thing in your inventory would always be the gas mask, I assumed what they meant by that is that when you open the inventory, you would automatically select the gas mask in the first slot of your inventory, meaning it would require only 2 button presses to equip a gas mask or take it off. But in the current system, it's not like that at all. It feels really clunky and unresponsive. Your gas mask can be anywhere inside your inventory rather than the dedicated slot that it should be in. It should be in the dedicated slot all the time, and they should consider changing it so that it's red when the gas mask is not in use, and when you press it, it turns white to make it in use, and it should always be the first thing that your inventory automatically flicks to. It shouldn't be occupying a backpack space, you shouldn't have to have it on permanently. The current system just doesn't work. They were close, but they haven't quite nailed it. Now, whilst I haven't been having the audio issues footstep-wise that other people have been encountering, I do understand where it's coming from. Now, the problem with Call of Duty's audio is that you basically have to run the game at 100% volume in order to effectively hear footsteps. I do that, but I use software conversion to reduce the overall sound of gunfights, meaning that I can bearably hear gunshots without them breaking my ears, and footsteps remain at 100% volume. Call of Duty generally needs to completely tweak its audio system, reducing the amount of ambient noise in the game. I would halve the audio of gunshot sounds and leave the footstep audio where it is or slightly increase it to bring it up in the audio mix. You only get good footstep audio in Call of Duty right now if you play the game at max volume, which if you don't have VSTs or software conversions or anything like audio emulation or sound equalization, you can't get the benefits of 100% audio without hearing gunshots at a ear-breakingly high level. The other thing that is a huge problem here is that the enemy dropping in audio seems to be completely busted and doesn't seem to play at some instances, so that needs to be addressed too, but that's likely just a bug. I don't want to go on a really long tangent about time to kill, because it's very early on in the life cycle of this new version of Warzone, and a large quantity of weapons have just entered the fray. But right now, things are feeling just a little bit too quick, about 20 to 30% too fast compared to what we should be at in terms of Warzone. I think the developers intentionally left a certain degree of lethality into the game, assuming that the faster movement of the game was going to offset some of those problems, that people would still be able to escape from those gunfights and get away. And that is a good suggestion and a generally good approach to things, but I just think they've slightly missed the mark in this demeanor. I think there's just something that's a little bit too rapid about it. It's not a huge percentage off, but just a little bit. And there are going to be some weapons as well that will be problematic in terms of being outliers. The DG58, by the looks of things, appears to just kill rapidly quicker than any other gun in the game, and once those are addressed fairly quickly, we should have a better TTK scenario. But I would like to see those balancing changes made before Christmas, not something we have to wait until Season 1 Reloaded. Next up is the new Mosquito drone kill streak. I think that needs to be removed from the game in its current instance. The Mosquito drone is not inherently clear where it is on the map. It sometimes doesn't appear correctly in the sky when it appears on the TAC map, and it doesn't make enough audio when it dive bombs an opponent. They are very easy to destroy, which does make them somewhat balanced, but right now, until they address the weird desync between the minimap and the Mosquito drone being in the air, I don't think it's worth having in the game. There's a couple of UI elements as well that they've tried to change, and I don't think they've gone very well. Feedback when you receive damage from enemy players just doesn't seem to actually promote any kind of psychological response, which sounds like a weird thing to say. I think the problem with this is that the sound of gunshots is too similar to the sound of your armor plate taking damage. I think the armor plate needs to have a more distinctive sound to make it specifically clear that you are receiving damage and that somebody isn't just vaguely firing in your direction. The general like dung 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 sound just isn't distinctive enough. It needs to be more of like a high-pitched sound or something that's just more obvious. I also have had a couple instances now where it isn't inherently clear if I have a self-revive. Now, obviously, I equip my self-res all the time, but sometimes I forget I have one, and the self-res text only appears on the screen for like a fraction of a second, and then it disappears. So I've actually given up in a few instances where I did actually have a self-revive, because it just wasn't inherently clear that it was there, or that the alert popped up, but it wasn't obvious. I would much prefer a very bright green piece of text in the middle of my screen telling me I have a self-res, rather than something very minimalistic that tries not to get in my way. It goes without saying, this is going to be one of the most frustrating issues in the game, and that is mantling through windows. The entirety of Urzikstan needs a pass on its window system. The windows right now do not automatically trigger properly. There are instances where I've been bumped into a window, haven't been able to mantle on one, haven't been able to jump through it, and it has gotten me killed on a number of occasions. I was hoping this was just going to be something that was slightly busted in zombies and that it would be fixed in Warzone, but that doesn't appear to be the case. The whole map just needs to have a better snapping between windows when your character goes for a vault, and it just needs to work better. This seems to appear most commonly when the ledge below the window is extremely low to the ground, which shouldn't be an issue for Warzone, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And finally, the pistols underwater need a change. I really love that you have a third weapon that you can bring out, but if you accidentally click triangle whilst you're underwater, you pick out your SMG or your LMG, which means that you cannot use the pistol. And you physically have to leave the body of water and then re-enter it in order to get the automatic third pistol to show up again, which is just not an intuitive system. I think if you're underwater and you press switch weapon, it will automatically go to your pistol, or if you hold triangle or hold switch weapon, it should pull out your third weapon slot, being your pistol. The current system of it just automatically appearing does not work properly, and you're going to have to get in the habit of not pulling out your guns when you're in the water, otherwise you'll lose the advantage. Overall, I think this version of Warzone is off to a really good start, and on the overarching side of things, there have been a lot of things that I've enjoyed and a lot of frustrations reduced. There's just a few things that seem to have slightly slipped through the gaps, and honestly, I think the most major one is clearly audio. The other things I can kind of live with, but for me personally, I don't have that problem with audio because I'm using an ultra specific setup to avoid that issue. But that's not something the average player should have to do, especially players on consoles who have far more limited options. The audio pass and audio shift needs to occur. Audio should be priority number one in Warzone right now, and I hope we see some movement on that soon. So that's about it for this video today, folks. I hope you've enjoyed the gameplay and the video and all the footage. Let me know what your thoughts and feelings are in the comment section below. Drop a like, drop a sub, and I'll see you in the next one.